Today, I sat down with Destany Wishon, the queen of PPC and the co-founder and CEO over at BetterAMS, an Amazon PPC advertising agency. Destany has fast become one of my favorite people in the industry. And it's not just because she is super charismatic and has tons to share, but she's real, she's honest, and she has a lot of great insights. And also we love all the same books, so that makes conversation easy. But we have a great conversation about a whole bunch of things. And you guys have heard this intro enough times by now to know that if you don't like it, you can switch it off. But I guarantee Destany adds the value, and was awesome having her on. Welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I talk to world-class professionals on what it takes to scale successful businesses. I dive deep asking questions to people who are running unicorn businesses, to raising funds, to buying businesses, mergers and acquisitions, IP and patent law, what is to manage performance management. I mean, the list goes on. The idea really is, how do I create knowledge and learning for you guys listening in? And of course, myself, getting the floor with people who I, in many cases, would never dream to share a room with. Before we jump into the episode, I've got to give a special thank you to our sponsors. Firstly, over at Global Wide Advisors, a leading digital consumer products investment bank focused on optimizing the sales process. An incredible team, always happy to pick up the phone and educate you or anyone about the sales process and what you should really consider, and can obviously help take you to market or even acquire businesses. I ring them for just about everything these days. Us over at Multiply Me, we are the end-to-end executive search and HR function into the Philippines, helping find better talent and onboarding them effectively. And last but not least, Escala, our management consultancy focused on process improvement, where we help build better systems for your business. That's all the ads you're going to get from me, ladies and gentlemen. The rest is all about learning. I hope you really enjoy and get as much out of these sessions as I do, sitting face to face with some of the world-renowned leaders in their respective fields, asking them the tough questions that they're not often asked. Destany, welcome to an episode of Successful Scales.
Super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, well, we really hit it off at that meetup in Laguna, and then we ended up spending the week really together. I feel like we were at every single event at Prosper together. And just, at least from my perspective, but I'll speak for you as well, we really just hit it off, and the rest, as I say, is history. So thanks for taking the time to sit down with me.
Of course. Lots of great energy right here. That was the best part, the vibes.
Absolutely. And I feel like you and I have talked about it to almost exhaustion, but like to not be sitting behind like a screen like we are right now, but not be sitting behind a screen and actually being able to interact with real humans, people that you get to deal with on the day in, day out from a professional standpoint and beyond. I mean, it was just awesome to be all in the same room and around that energy.
Yeah, the relationship building. I mean, if I walked away from anything in Prosper, it would truly be around building relationships with some incredible people. Forget the brands, forget the knowledge, e-commerce, education. There were so many just awesome people standing in one room, and then one room turned into 12 different events that we all got to talk to people with. But it was awesome.
Yeah, and spot on. And I feel like we'll definitely touch on that as we dig in here. So before we dig in, I am not going to be the one to butcher your experience here. I'm obviously acutely aware of what BetterAMS does, but I'd love you to tell the listeners out there who are tuning in a little bit about yourself and also just your history and how you've gotten to where you sit. It's about scale, and everyone has, an origin story, and we aren't where we were today. So I'd love in your words to hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Destany Wishon, and I am co-founder and CEO of BetterAMS. BetterAMS is an Amazon advertising agency. We have been in this space for 4.5 years now, I think it's been. Time flies when you're having fun. But where we are now is definitely not where we started. As with everyone, a lot goes by. But Taylor and I, met about 4 years ago, and we were running Amazon advertising campaigns for two very different styles of avatars. I was working with vendors and large retailers, He was working with very scrappy private label sellers. And we met, realized we had a ton of synergy, decided we could see what we could do with BetterAMS. And, fast forward, we're where we're at now. We have 20 team members. We manage around $4 to $5 million worth of spend a month. And we're just having a ton of fun in the e-commerce space.
Wow, that is impressive growth and a pretty cool story. I mean, I want to ask you from a starting point, and I think for me as someone who has a co-founder too, and our story, I'll tell you in a second how we met if I haven't already. But how did you guys actually meet? I guess you were both playing in the same space, but yeah, how did that come about?
So I'm based in Bentonville, Arkansas, and Taylor's based out of Panama. And I happened to get a global sources presentation deck, literally sent to my email. And I was like, hey, this video is on PPC. I checked it out and I saw this 19-year-old, very young kid speaking on stage in Hong Kong about PPC. And it really intrigued me seeing someone my age speaking my language, especially in the early days. Like there wasn't a ton of people actually on the internet putting out a lot of content. So I Google searched his name, totally cyber stalked him, went to his website, and I found out more about him. And I ended up working with him as an account executive. And it was the scariest, riskiest thing I've ever done in my life, to quit my consistent full-time job and basically I'm going to try to work with this kid who is 20 years old out of Panama. He can't even drink alcohol yet. And I went for it. And thankfully I did, because it was the best decision I've made in my life to date. I mean, don't tell him I said that, but it's going really well.
Well, I'll be upset if Taylor doesn't listen to the podcast, so he's going to hear it.
That's true.
No. But no, so super interesting. Look, most people are, they're looking for, when you talk about building businesses, you're looking for purpose. There's a lot of cliche sayings around it, but love what you do, never work a day in your life, and all of that good stuff. Now, you've taken a gamble here and you've gone to work for someone as an account executive, and then you've actually formed a partnership in the business. I mean, what were those conversations like? I know a lot of people are probably looking for, for me as well, and just to sort of cut to the chase here, I was a solopreneur. I built an agency by myself. It was doing great. I was doing, $20,000 a month in revenue in my second or third month. And I hated it. I just couldn't go the journey solo. I love to have sort of someone to bounce ideas off and to work hand in hand with. But yeah, how did, if you were in a position, you took this risk, what was the logic behind it?
At the time, and this is what made it work, it was a side hustle. If you were to take the partnership Taylor and I have now, how close we have to work together, the stressors that we have to maintain, and thrown that on us 4.5 years ago, we would have never worked out. I think that there is a lot of relationship building that should be done before taking that leap for a partnership. And there's a lot of learning, which was the biggest hurdle we had to overcome is, I am very much so a visionary. I like big ideas. I like the exact same, having that relationship, having someone to bounce all of your ideas off of, things like that. So I'm an 85% visionary. And then Taylor's 87% integrator, which means he's very systems oriented, loves processes, efficiencies, things like that. And we speak two very different languages. I like to make quick decisions, throw things on the table, talk about it, let's go. Taylor likes to discuss and analyze everything. In the very beginning of our relationship, we didn't touch on that as much because we were in a similar boat. We were just hustling. We didn't have time to have long discussions about the small second order consequences of culture and things like that. So that was, I think, the biggest differentiator for us, is that we were slowly able to evolve to where we are now.
So for those listening, what Destany's talking about is something that comes up a ton, and that's EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, being a visionary integrator and having implementers, delivering a lot of the work. And so when you bring them together, this effectively, it feels like magic when you find a really good, as a visionary, when you find a great integrator, or vice versa too. You're an integrator, you find a great visionary. I mean, there's a whole community called the COO Alliance that's about the second in command. And they typically are the best integrators in the world. So highly recommend anyone who hasn't heard me talk about it. I actually had Mike Payton, who is the visionary that came in after Gino Wickman. So he was, I mean, not his replacement, well, effectively his replacement after Gino sort of moved on. And yeah, I think it's hugely valuable for anyone listening. But back to you, because this is why we're here right now. I mean, we're here to talk about scale, but do you guys, at the start of the relationship, you said Taylor's out of Panama, you are in the US. Are you guys working in the same space, or are you still remote? Is he still in Panama?
Still remote, and we've stayed fully remote, which is a blessing and a curse. And there's a lot that can be discussed there. I feel like just growing a team fully virtual. But yeah, we were, hopping on Zoom if we had any questions, but we weren't in the same office. So we weren't able to really throw those ideas off each other, have those really deep discussions, things like that. It was more like, this needs to be done. Let's do it. Do whatever it takes to get to the next level.
Yeah, insane. It's just crazy. I'm just like processing. You were an account executive working for Taylor, and now you're the CEO of the joint company. What was that? What was that? Yeah, as in, like, what was that conversation like?
So it didn't happen for a while. What kind of how it played out is Taylor had a few other ventures he was really looking at, and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to spend some time focusing on this. If you want to learn more about sales and marketing and grow BetterAMS even further, feel free to do it." I was like, okay. So I bought a bunch of books and took some courses, and I started posting a lot of content, and I kind of approached marketing a little bit different in this space. I kind of tried to hit the retail side. I tried to be more professional with our branding, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I just tried to be a very kind, honest, helpful person. And that resonated really well. And it kind of went crazy. And we finally got to a point where I was like, "Taylor, I think we need to hire someone. I cannot manage the account load." So we got together, we hired an employee. We still have never met in person at this point whatsoever. Hired someone through my network, brought him on board. He was the perfect fit for our personalities. And then things just never slowed down. And then my role continued to progress as like more of the people person, more of the managing people, visionary. And we're sitting in Mexico a year and a half ago, and we're working on our org chart, and we're laying everything out. And Taylor's still, by all intents and purposes, the CEO of the company. He looks at me, he goes, "I don't think this makes sense from an EOS perspective. I think from an EOS perspective, you need to be the CEO." And I was like, "What? Like, that's not something that had ever been even in my mind whatsoever." He goes and updates LinkedIn before telling our team.
That's awesome.
"Oh, okay, Taylor, we have like multiple employees at this point." He updates LinkedIn, and that was it. No other words. Taylor was like, "Just symbols. It doesn't mean anything." And I was like, "It does, though. It's scary." But it had to happen that way because it forced me into kind of progressing.
Definitely. And I think that's the one thing as well, giving the title, the responsibility, because I'm also one, I don't really care too much for titles, but giving the CEO title and that responsibility to someone who's not actually looking for it, I think is usually the best. It's the best case scenario. My dream, I've said this like time and time again. I joke about it. I would say probably once a month to the consulting team. Like, my dream job is to be a consultant in our process improvement consultancy. So I like slip them the last resume that I ever made. I'm like, "Just look at this candidate. He's great. I'm telling you, he'll fit right in." And, I could care less about titles and all those things, but I think that's also a beautiful thing too. And the fact that, after going through that EOS process and realizing the skill sets and the strengths and the weaknesses, and the fact that you are a visionary, you're going to have a ton of ideas, and of the 100 ideas you have, maybe one of them will be good, right? Yeah. I always say,
Taylor's like, "Your job's easy."
Yeah.
Like, you just sit back and think about things. That's all you do.
Well, that's not all you do. I've got to say, I have been keeping a close eye on your content, and just looking at looking at the level of insights and I was just watching a video, I think you might have even posted it today or yesterday, about looking at brand category. You're looking at, I want to say Crayola.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. So I was watching that and I was like, wow, what an interesting way to actually assess the space and look at like what the share of effectively brand equity was like in it, and understanding how you can actually push forward. I mean, those are not low level conversion rate tactical insights. Those are, from my perspective, and someone also who historically bought a lot of media, more so in the Facebook space, I have a deep appreciation for what that actually signals. So I guess all that thinking time for you translates into high level content. And like you said, it's about giving. How do you actually help people first? And from that, let's see where it turns out. And, I've heard great things about BetterAMS and all that you guys are doing in the space. And so it's no surprise that you're winning so much business, and you've grown from the two of you to a team of 20 in not a whole lot of time.
It's been crazy. It's not slow down. And also thank you for all of that. That was really kind.
Also, I'm gonna coin you the queen of PPC. There it is.
It's only okay if it's not self-proclaimed. So
100%. So there you go. I dub thee.
I dub thee. I'm gonna make this. We need some micro content of this and be like, someone said it was true. So
yeah, you can. You know what? If you want to create that content, you can quote me on it. I'd be happy to put my name against it with pleasure.
That's all I needed. Done.
Done. That's it. My job here is done. All right, we can end the episode. That's what we're just trying to get that little audio bite out of it. But in all seriousness, you've grown a team to 20, all entirely remote. And I also know acutely what that's like to build an entirely remote business. I'm curious to hear, like, I think for a lot of people, and especially like, let's talk about Multiply Me's buying audience. For a lot of people, it's a scary consideration to like hire offshore talent for the first time, and like, what does that look like? And but how can I work with them remotely? And I'm curious from your perspective, like, you've clearly made it work and work well. Like, what are some of the things when you think about bringing people into the business, or your interview process, or anything that relates to running a remote team? Like, what are some of the things that have worked for you, and if are there things that really haven't?
100%. One of the things that helped us get started was we didn't have like the biases that traditional, retailers typically have. Anyone who's worked in an office, you have a bias of why you want someone in your office. You do have better communication. You can brush shoulders quicker, much more flexible, things like that. But we went into the industry without having that. We actually had no management experience. So I think that's allowed us to kind of study what's worked for others, but also mold things in our own way and test a little bit quicker. And one of the biggest things I think that we came to the realization of was just hire amazing people. Do not cut corners. If you cut corners, you'll pay for that, especially with a fully virtual team where you may not catch all of the red flags, the yellow flags. Something big typically has to happen, and you have to be able to move quickly if that does happen. But that's the biggest thing that we've came to the realization of, is you either need to have absolute expert level training in order to get someone to that next level, and or expert level hiring. And regardless, they need to have like the fundamental work ethic. They need to have very high culture and alignment, because you are virtual. So you don't have as many touch points. And if those touch points are negative, then that's gonna be a terrible experience for everyone. So I would say those are probably the two biggest realizations we had.
Could not agree with you anymore if I tried. You touched on from and shocking, right? You touched on like the two key areas, right? It's, you want to bring in the best talent always, and you should make no compromise on that. I was reading an incredible book called Who, The A Method of Hiring. And I can't recommend that enough to you and to anyone listening as well. Fundamentally changed the way in which I think about the hiring process and how to bring in and effectively bring in the best people. But one of the things that I read inside of that book was that the true cost of a bad hire is 15 times or more of what their base salary is. So if you hire, $100,000 employee, that's a $1.5 million error on your part. That's just astronomical, right? Isn't that a scary
Makes things
consideration?
scary.
But you talked about the other part as well, right? Is having expert level processes on how to educate, induct, onboard, and train the right people. And so if you can, in the perfect world, what you want to do is you want to hire the best people and then build the processes to continue to upskill them. And that's the holy grail. But yeah, I honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself when you talk about, the key things that you should look at to really make the remote team work. But you actually said something else that blew my mind. And I actually can't believe that this is the reality that we live in. I have always worked in office spaces with my team around me. And we're now moving into a generation where effectively, yes, with COVID and what's happened, it's really forced it. But I'd say even before that as well, I was working with all remote teams now for 4 or 5 years. And so we're moving to a generation where you may never have people working in the same space ever. I don't know if it's a fun fact. It's honestly a little sad for me, but I've never been to the Philippines. We've got 150 people on payroll over there. That is a pretty crazy realization. We only didn't get there because of COVID. We'd booked flights. We were flying the whole team to Cebu, and we had this whole incredible villa booked. It was supposed to be amazing, and it was March 15, 2020.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so
that timing.
That was exactly the day that they locked down Manila, and so we didn't get on the flight. It was, and then they locked down Tel Aviv shortly after that as well. But just a crazy realization. We're living in a world right now where all things are, from a conceptual standpoint, all the way through build. And now, I'm sure like me, you're hearing a whole lot about exit pretty frequently. It's building, buying, selling, creating businesses without ever sitting in the same room as the same people or ever meeting them in person, which is just such a crazy reality that we live in, and something that will continue to be true. So you've gone through this process, right? You've met your co-founder, you've become the CEO, and you guys are still not living in the same place, which again, it's funny. Lippy and I just recently got a co-working space together, but I still find myself working from home more than sitting in the office with him. And the funniest thing was that we actually opted not to have an office, even though we live about 600 yards from one another, for a year and a half. And it was because we were more effective. I was on calls all day. Lippy was building with the team. He has to listen to me drone on about whatever I'm talking about. Or I don't know if you're like this too, but I get excited about a new idea and I have to talk to someone about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be 9:00 and Taylor's are we just, what's the purpose of this call? And I'll be like, Taylor, we don't need to set a purpose for every single call. This is just friendship. So now he'll joke. He'll be like, is this a friendship call or do you have a purpose here? And friendship for me is joining on all the ideas I have. So
100%. And, you guys are wired so differently as a fundamental when you talk about visionary and integrator that, you want this free flowing, creative process. And he needs to have it very structured. Like you said, every agenda, what's the action item? Let's get an outcome here. And for you, I'm putting words into your mouth, but I just feel like you and I are one and the same in that regard. Even just sitting and talking through things is starting to kind of move the needle and create sort of the next thought process and the next iteration. And that's going to grow into whatever else that becomes. I know that you started sort of on the PPC wagon and you've built BetterAMS. Just going all the way back, how did you end up in PPC?
So being based out of Bentonville, I am very close to all of the vendors that sell to Walmart. So ton of vendor offices here, things like that. Immediately after graduating college, I got an internship at the first kind of full Amazon consultancy in the area. And I got started as a digital media hire. Now, what was different about that is since there were all these vendors in our backyard, those are the brands I was working with. So I was, 21 years old, managing $10 million of budget a quarter. And it was very overwhelming, and it was very much a trial by fire scenario. E-commerce was just now really starting to kind of get hot in the space back then. So the company I was working for was scaling very, very quickly. I was getting to learn a lot very quickly. And then I haven't stopped since. So hopefully nothing happens to Amazon, because I have 5 years of nothing but PPC knowledge to keep me rolling.
Well, as someone who comes from other forms of advertising, I spent probably $20 million plus in my career on Facebook media and a bunch on Google AdWords. I mean, especially with what I've seen from a content perspective, like the stuff that you're putting out, you probably wouldn't find it too hard to transition into other areas of media buying and all the aspects around it. Is that a consideration? Like when you're thinking about the growth of BetterAMS and sort of how far do you push it? Like, do you think about like what's the maybe not what the end goal is? I don't know that that's necessarily like, I'm a big believer in like that whole infinite game mentality, yes, and that there isn't never necessarily ends. Exactly. It never ends, but exactly. Right. So, I mean, like how far ahead do you guys plan into the future, or like, what's your sort of, probably a better question for Taylor. You and I are going to sit here and talk about like 50 years into the future. Yeah, exactly. But when you guys are talking about it, like what does like future state look like? How far into the future?
So I think there's really two factors to consider here. We like to do a lot of like first principle thinking and like what needs to happen to get us to this next level. And one of the realizations was that when you are a people-based business, it's very hard to scale because you have to be able to scale people incredibly well. Right now, we're still in a bottleneck of trying to be able to hire quick enough. And that's kind of led us to, in our industry, I think the people that are going to win in the e-commerce space are people who know how to say no. And that's because you can start a company on your phone, call a supplier, have a social media team, have a full team within a second without ever meeting someone in person. Like the internet's allowed us that capability. But with that, people are starting agencies. They're not saying no to leads. They're trying to scale too fast. They're trying to do Walmart, Amazon, content, all of these things. And when you're a people-based business, you can spread your people too thin very quick. So at our last offsite, I had the realization, if we're going to hop into any other ventures, whether it be Walmart, whether it be Facebook ads, then we need to have one of two things. We need to have time for Taylor and I to hop in, fully manage, build out the operations and start something, or we need to have money for us to hire somebody to fully hop in, build up the operations and start something. I don't want to half-ass do anything because then you get to be spreading way too thin. So that was a very like light bulb moment for us that if we hop into any industry, we need one of two things. And those are the two things that I think are kind of needed to start something. So yes, in all honesty, my roadmap is Walmart, my roadmap's DSP. I want to get into Instacart. I want to get into all of these things, but I don't want to do it now because I want to continue going really deep, providing premium level service. Then when we get more cash flow to invest in those industries, we'll definitely look at it.
So all I'm hearing here is that Taylor is really washing off on you here. He's reining you in.
I'm a good listener.
No, that's listen. That's very, very smart and very, very calculated. And I would say as well, like spot on. Being able to say no is where you do the most damage in terms of growth, and understanding who you are and who you're not are the things that will, decide your fate, whether it's success or failure. So yeah, I really respect the calculated and very concise approach that you either need cash or time to invest in it. And yeah, I might take some of your advice here myself, where I always feel like I'm spread too thin, but no, in reality, you're right. Like we continue to find incredible people. And I just read Working Backwards, the book about a couple of very senior people inside of Amazon, wrote all about the Amazon leadership principles and how they relate to the growth of the business, and a whole lot of like anecdotal stories about like businesses that succeeded and failed inside of Amazon. And super interesting. But one of the principles that is inside of Amazon that we've adopted among with many others is separable single-threaded leadership. So having people who can own a specific function or a specific outcome or a specific deliverable. So like as we're building out the company and we're building technology and we've got Escala and Multiply Me, there is someone who is like directly accountable and responsible for each business unit and then even below it. So like right now for us, not enough's happening in the marketing space. And so we need to find a marketing manager and they will become our single-threaded leader, making sure almost like you almost need like an integrator for every single outcome or every single function and every 100%. Single delivery. But you're clearly making good decisions in how you're approaching it too. So I can again really relate and respect sort of those decisions. So when we're a little frozen, but I'm still getting audio, so I think we're going to be okay.
Back to normal.
Back to normal. Yeah, it looks like it might be my internet, to be honest with you. So, Will, if this is good, let it keep rolling. But if it's struggling, then you can cut it. People listening at home, I hope you've enjoyed this little intermission where Destiny and I show you exactly what like real life is like. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and things aren't perfect and you can be I'm just really happy that the dog's not barking. I mean, that's like a big win in my books.
Virtual teams. You gotta roll with the punches.
Do you know what? You actually reminded me of something interesting too about the whole notion of like just having virtual teams and being entirely virtual as a company. I was saying like when I get excited by an idea, I want to turn around to the closest person and talk to them. But like when you're each working remotely, and especially if you build the org chart like you guys have, and there's accountabilities and responsibilities and clear directives, the whole landscape shifts in terms of the level of efficiency and productivity. Like, are you guys doing your L10 meetings every week?
We are not. So there were things that we kind of picked up and tried to blend. Instead of rocks, we kind of decided to stick with OKRs, like the more Google model of it. We do have like a Monday stand-up that's somewhat aligned, but this was something we went through is, we read all these books on like processes and different management techniques. And I personally don't like being managed, of course, because I want to be able to free flow and like, I can't block schedule and things like this. But I had the realization that every single management book out there is built spontaneous communication. So we've been taking some certain things and trying to be a little bit more flexible for them. So that way we can be more flexible. It's why we moved away from the Rocks OKR model is we wanted shorter time spans to be able to make decisions within the business. So that's where we're at now. We're trying to figure out what fits best for us, but somewhat blended model. Still great book because we're setting our whole foundation from all of these things, but yes.
So couldn't agree with you more. Again, I don't know how many times I have to say shocking, and it's just really cool to see how aligned we are in the way we look at it. So I agree. I don't think rocks give you enough. They give you too much wiggle room effectively. Yeah. And so when you go through the L10 meeting every week, it's like, okay, well, this rock isn't on track. Okay, so what? So you put it to the IDS, but you need to break them down even further. And I think OKRs, which we integrate and implement into many businesses when we talk about a Scala, can be a lot more effective. And so it's finding that happy, it's building your own methodology. Yeah. Like all of these books, everything's telling you like more or less the same thing in different ways. And it's about how do you adapt the right methodology to building an effectively run business with the knowledge that you have and what works for your team. There's no one size fits all solution.
Yeah. Something you mentioned, I think this is going to be a huge move for all the companies that have very large offices, is transitioning to almost a fully output-based model. It's not necessarily who's in the office 24 hours. You don't see that a lot. You can look at Slack and see whose green light's on, But at the end of the day, when we're all managing these virtual teams, it's got to be very much an output-based model. You can't micromanage how many hours someone's online. And I don't care if you're online 20 hours, if you're only, putting out 5 hours of work. That's something that like different personality types do really well. Taylor's great at working really deep at something. I'm really great at working lightly. And it's like figuring out how to combine all those personalities for the right projects and truly look at output. And the book that we've really been running with is No Rules from Netflix. It is one of our favorite books. And one of the sayings that I've been like bullish on lately is setting context, not control. So the whole premise of the book is hiring kick-ass people. And then coming to those people and saying, here's the context of what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm not going to tell you how to do it.
Brilliant.
This virtual model, it is very much more so blended. So it's allowing my people to know the context of what they're trying to accomplish and then letting them accomplish it. I don't need to micromanage that. And that's been really cool to kind of see how that plays out lately. But you have to have amazing people.
But you bring up, so firstly, that book is actually sitting inside of my Audible, and it'll be the next one that I listen to when I'm walking the dog in the morning. Yeah, that good?
It's my favorite book by far. So
wow,
yeah.
that makes me so excited. I love it when I feel like I'm always dishing out book recommendations, and I'll send you my list after we get off this call too. I feel like there'll be some that I feel like you probably read a lot of them, but there might be one or two good nuggets in there for you. But yeah, excited about that. It's also a little bit too, when you talk about Amazon and working backwards, I think you'll really like. It's exactly that. It's about setting expectations, like in Who, the A method of hiring. They talk about when you're actually going to interview someone, don't just build a job description, build the outcome. Like, what does success look like in this role? Not what are the tasks and responsibilities and what are you going to deliver on the day-to-day? Like, if I'm looking at hiring a marketing manager now, I'm not just going to say like has experience in media buying and has experience in website management. Like, I'm going to define the outcomes. Like, success in this role means making sure that our website is up to date with our current day, what we're delivering, making sure that our content strategy is aligned with exactly what it is and the messaging that we're trying to get out to serve the potential clients and even beyond, anyone in the space, how we're going to help them. It's actually what's the outcome and what's the desired output. And I take it even further. And I'd say that one of the things we've noticed lately is, like, for the recruiters, for example, like they have a KPI in our team. We've got a team of 10 recruiters inside of Multiply Me. It's like they have to place 2 people a month, which I think isn't a ridiculous ask, but that's too much, too far down the line of like the final output. So we actually are going to transition to measuring inputs. And what I mean by that is, like, how many candidates did you speak to this week and how many of them were put into our applicant tracking system? Like, breaking down that to how many phone conversations did you have? Like, where was the value? Where were the candidates coming from? Like, breaking down the metrics and the data to like the lowest common denominator. So you can say, right, if I spent more time having conversations with really high level people, then that's going to lead me into the next flow on effect. And rather than just saying, right, you have to, like, it's like someone, exactly. Like, imagine I came to you and I said, right, I want my ACOS at 10% and here's $1 million and that's it. Like,
Okay. Got to break it down.
Like,
have you read the sales acceleration formula?
I have. Mark Robage.
That book really helped me break down the tiny pieces. Because like you mentioned, if you're talking about recruiters, it's like, if there's a drop off in that first conversation they have with someone in the second conversation, you need to know what's happening and how to optimize that first call. Maybe you need a better follow-up system. That way you can figure out exactly where your systems and processes are breaking down to get that final outcome. That was one of the best books I've read for this whole conversation. I loved it, how they broke it down.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think I've ever said that phrase more times in the span of like 40 minutes in my life. But yeah, that was like a massively eye-opening book for me too. I also love, and I think it like rings true to hiring in general, but when he talks about hiring a sales team, like the 5 elements that he looks for: curiosity,
Yes.
intelligence, what are the other 3? Curiosity, intelligence, work ethic, coachability, and I'm not gonna remember the last one, but just everything in that book is absolute gold, and it just shows how intelligent Mark is in his ability to break down what is like a suit. He took Mark Robarge built HubSpot's sales team. He took HubSpot from 0 to 100 million in recurring revenue in 7 years. I mean, just absolutely insane. I mean, what even is that, right?
We implemented that process with just our general hiring. So the whole premise of it, for those who haven't read the book, is that you basically actually find the personality traits that equate to success. And he didn't know that for sales in the beginning. So like he split test, let's hire someone that has amazing sales knowledge. And then let's basically track how well they do. And then 6 months from now, we're going to see if that sales knowledge actually created great output. And what he found was, people who had previous sales knowledge maybe had misconceptions about how he wanted HubSpots to run sales, so they weren't a good fit. But what he did find is people that had a predisposition for strong work ethic did have good output. And then you could basically like take that regression analysis and know on a score what makes a good employee. So we sat down and did similar EQ, vibes, Amazon advertising knowledge are some of the things that we put into place. And we don't have enough, we're not scaling account executives quick enough to really have a strong regression of this correlates with success. But it's really allowed us to not intuitively like someone, but be able to have the data to back a hiring decision. And that was a really cool aspect of that book for us, is being able to track what personality traits actually equate to success in a role.
Yeah, unreal. I mean, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left here. And, like we said before we hit record, we could probably talk for hours. I'm also just cognizant of the internet bandwidth. It's kind of holding up, but I wish you could see, and maybe who knows how it'll actually transition when I download this, but you look like this pretty sick Instagram filter. That's what I'm kind of seeing when I'm looking at you right now.
Not too detailed.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. I don't know if it'll actually the output will look like that, but I'm this is I feel like I'm tripping over here. But anyway, before I let you go, because I'd definitely love to touch base with you again and potentially have you back on, and even I can foresee a series where I go back to people a year on or a year and a half on, and we talk about what that growth has looked like over that period. Yes. And I'm, not to put pressure on you, but I'm expecting big things, because I know that, I've also had the good fortune of meeting Taylor as well and some of the team. And, I have a very good understanding of just how capable you guys are. So, I'd be shocked if that trajectory didn't go further. But for anyone who is looking to get in touch, I mean, this is a time to tell them a little bit more about BetterAMS and obviously getting in touch with you.
Yeah, for sure. I would say, one of the best places is to just check out some of the content Taylor put out on LinkedIn. You can even add us on Facebook. Taylor has his own YouTube channel, which is very much kind of a series around every process, every issue we've ran into in the company. We want to teach it and have a learning experience around it. So YouTube channel is a great place. And then if you're interested in anything Amazon advertising, check us out at BetterAMS.com.
And yeah, and I'm just going to totally double down on that plug there. The queen of Amazon, and the content that, seriously though, the content that I am witnessing, and from someone who has, lived in this space, in terms of digital advertising for over a decade, really, really impressed with just the level of consideration and how you think about it. And also the amount of effort you put into just giving away shit for free. I think that it's one thing to post a little graph and have a bit of information around it. It's another thing to invest. I'm pretty sure I watched you for 10 minutes today, breaking down exactly your logic and why, you're really giving the gift of how to actually approach, strategy, and with no expectations other than trying to help people make better decisions for their business. So, really resonates with me. And on that note, thank you so much for taking the time and sitting down and having this chat. I've loved every minute.
Of course. Thank you so much, Yanni. I'm sure we'll have multiple of these coming up, primarily because you're amazing to speak with. But also, I think we could talk for days.
Yeah, I know that's for sure. Well, again, thanks so much. And just great to have some time chatting about the things that we both love.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.